Put your hands on top of your head.
Well, I didn't.
Now!
Bet your mother had a loud bark.
Meet the Seattle Vigilante. Like so many comic heroes, this warrior hides his identity. But his identity isn't the only secret he has to keep. After grievous wounds received during combat, Tier 1 operator John Russell begins to recover and comes to terms with his new reality of being an amputee. And as he learns how to use his new prosthetic limb, he finds himself caught up in the bureaucratic red tape that too many wounded veterans experience, the exhausting medboard process. Out of sheer frustration, John takes it out on the criminal scum of the city. But when reality kicks in, John realizes he started something that's having an impact on the greater world around him, and thus has to reevaluate his motives. And moreover, just how far is John willing to go to finish this war he's declared against the criminals in Seattle? And will he even survive? From the creator of IDW's award-winning graphic novel Code Word Geronimo comes a new story about a different kind of warrior, Vindicated Inc., the first of its kind disabled veteran action hero comic. The Vindicated Inc. graphic novel crowdfunding campaign on fundmycomic.com is provided in the description of this video. We hope you become a contributor. Please share this link. Thank you.
Good morning. This is Morning Coffee with the Chief. I'm your host, Patrick Jordan, and I am so happy to be here, you guys, today. We're right on the cusp of Christmas. I hope you guys have all your Christmas trees up and are having a good holiday season. Now, I'm really excited about the bowl games coming up. And today we have a wonderful show. I have a couple guys returning from the U.S. Marshals, and we're going to talk about The Fugitive. But before I get into The Fugitive, the movie The Fugitive, let me talk about the LA mission. The Los Angeles mission is an entity that serves the homeless people in downtown Los Angeles. Now, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, now I took a couple weeks off from hosting the show, and Cliff Yates filled in for me, so I greatly appreciate Cliff. He does a great job. And but I went down to feed the homeless like I told you I was going to do. That Wednesday we fed them a full Thanksgiving meal with all the trim-ins. And, you know, I caught COVID down there. I had avoided COVID for 4 years, and I caught it down there, and it laid me up for a little while. Hey, Admiral, how are you doing? And then I went out of town to visit my daughter and granddaughters once I had recovered. So I'm glad to be back. The other thing I also wanted to talk about is I do have another show. The show is Briefing with the Chief. It's on every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it's on Rumble, and it's KGRA's channel, Rumble with KGRA. It also gets broadcast on KGRA's digital broadcasting network. And my last show was Police Suicides, and I don't want to say I was happy to do a show on police suicides, but it was a necessary show because it's something that we don't talk about very much. But today we're going to talk about The Fugitive, which is really, we already did U.S. Marshals with a couple Marshals, which is kind of the sequel to the movie The Fugitive. But now I had to go back and do The Fugitive with my guest from the U.S. Marshal, and let's bring these guys on. My first guest is Robert Ledogar. And Robert is a retired supervisory deputy U.S. Marshal, and from New York. So you're going to hear a little bit of an accent, although he's a refugee from the blue state. He's down in that red state, the DeSantis state that we call Florida, enjoying the weather. And Robert, how are you? And welcome to the show.
Hey, Chief. Good morning, man. I'm doing good, thank you.
But I'm a flip flopper all over the place. I went from New York to Florida, but I'm a Bama fan, so the Florida State's not too happy right now, with the playoffs.
Well, I am a Michigan fan, and
Oh,
so Michigan and Alabama will be facing each other. It'll be curious to see. About a few years ago, they were talking about the SEC so strong and the Big Ten so weak, and then the Big Ten kind of roared back a little bit. Ohio State kind of spanked Alabama a couple of years, but Alabama has been strong for many, many years, and the SEC has been strong. But the Big Ten has kind of revived a little, although not so much this year. Just a couple of teams are really super strong, and the other ones are kind of weak this year. But I am looking forward to the game. Alabama, if they're in the Rose Bowl this year, is that correct? Is that where they're playing?
right. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that game. That'll be exciting, and it'll be interesting to see if the other teams in the playoff hold up. So I won't hold it against you that you're a Bama fan.
Thank you.
Because you and Craig are my two favorite former U.S. Marshals. And let's bring up our second guest. And now he's retired Inspector Deputy U.S. Marshal Craig Caine. And now Craig is also a historian of the U.S. Marshals, which makes it so much more interesting to have him come on and review these movies in which the U.S. Marshals have a big footprint in the characterization. And Craig, welcome to the show. And how are you doing?
Thank you, Chief. Yes, good morning. Just want to correct, I'm not an official U.S. Marshal historian. In my own mind, I'm a historian.
Well, this is my show, and I could decide who is official and who's not official on the show, right? I don't. That's what freedom's all about, right?
Exactly.
So you are the official historian for the U.S. Marshals for Pop Culture Minefield, Morning Coffee with the Chief, and maybe down the road, Briefing with the Chief on my other platform if I start talking about federal law enforcement, which I think I want to talk a little bit about just cop work with you guys as it relates to the U.S. Marshals. So the first thing I want to ask you guys, because I did a pretty serious show on police suicides. Did you guys ever experience any of your partners committing suicide? And it was clearly a connection to the job at all?
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
and Bobby did too. It was someone who we knew, worked with for many years, and it was just a travesty. I worked for his father, who actually hired me, and it really shook us to the core when this happened, because I knew this guy when he was a young college student, and he used to come into the office, and he was like, "Someday I'm going to come and I'm going to be one of you guys," and he had a pretty stellar career until the crap hit the fan, so to speak.
And it's one of those things. I chose to do the show because it took that we had 4 police officers or deputy sheriffs in LA County commit suicides in a 24-hour period in November, and then one a few days later committed suicide. So 5 in a month, which is, we're a large agency, 18,000 employees, but that's huge, and it's way beyond. It was way beyond the average for police officers, but the suicide by police officers is way beyond the average for the general population. But it's something we don't talk about, and I think if there are some folks in law enforcement listening to the show, if you need help, seek help. Start talking. If you're an administrator, like all of us were supervisors and administrators, you got to pay attention to your troops and try and have an impact. If you see something, just ask questions. When I used to get guys get in trouble, so I would ask, all right, what's going on in your life that caused you to change how you're acting? And sometimes they would open up and it was something else. It wasn't really them. It was something else causing it, and I was able to intercede. But I'm glad I asked you that question. But the other thing I wanted to ask you guys about, I was doing some research on the show, and I just want to clarify. So the U.S. Marshals is the oldest federal law enforcement agency of all the federal law enforcement agencies. Is that correct, Craig?
Yes, it is.
And the interesting thing is it also tends to have the broadest authority. Would that be accurate?
That's correct.
It doesn't have more authority in terms of investigating cases than the FBI, but it tends to have a more broader authority or the ability to have broader authority. It can be designated to have greater authority than just by the president or Congress, right?
Well, by statute, and the history of the U.S. Marshal Service is unique to any other type of law enforcement because I think we might have touched on this a little bit on the last show, but just to give you a view as a quick oversight, when we were under the crown, so to speak, the British, they had in their colonies a sheriff, okay, and the sheriff was the highest ranking law enforcement, if you want to call it that back then, for them 13 colonies. So the colonies. So when we had the revolution and all, and George Washington appointed the first 13 U.S. Marshals for the first 13 states. There was no other really law enforcement, to enforce counterfeiting, because counterfeiting was very prevalent because, we really didn't establish a monetary system yet. That was all in the works. So there was still money with the crown, English money. There was French money, Spanish monies. And, there was a lot of counterfeiting going on, and there was no Secret Service. So, as the country progressed and more territories like the Oklahoma Territory, Arkansas, gravitated to the west, the marshals would be the only law enforcement authority in that, region. So, there was nobody else to turn to except the local sheriffs, and, their powers were limited to either whether they were like Wyatt Earp. A lot of people don't realize he actually started out as a town marshal, right. Okay, somewhere in Kansas or something like that, and then he moved out west to Tombstone area, and at some point in time he was appointed as a deputy U.S. Marshal. I don't believe he was ever a U.S. Marshal. That's appointed that's a presidential appointee. But as the advent of the country started progressing, it was moving forward. There were new crimes to investigate, and that's when they started to incorporate different agencies. And one would be the predecessor to the ATF. They were revenuers, okay? Mm-hmm. And then back in the 1920s, Hoover and his boys with the FBI, they were only investigators for the U.S. Attorney's Office. They had no statutory or police powers. So what happens is when one of these revenuers would have to go bust up a still or search for, counterfeit, they would have to bring a U.S. Marshal with them to effect the arrest. And the same with the FBI, until one FBI agent went out and got himself killed. And then they petitioned Congress to, give them statutory authority, to carry a weapon and make federal arrests. But prior to that, all they were was like an investigative arm. So they had no power. And, as the country progressed, and they started making these other agencies like Secret Service, the U.S. Marshal Service is, a lot of people don't realize that the U.S. Marshal Service was one of the, besides the military, the U.S. Marshal was one of the primary protectors of the president. And when Lincoln got shot that night, he was very good friends with the U.S. Marshal. And he gave the marshal an assignment and said, hey, take the night off. I'm only going to the theater, do this assignment for me out of state. And what happened? They whacked him,
Right.
And then they created the Secret Service, and just like all these other agencies, the DEA, their predecessor was the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, and then they became the DEA. So, the Marshal Service on the books never lost any of its power. But there was a lot of MOUs, of course, you know what that means, memo of understanding between different agencies. Okay, you do this. If you make the case, you could make the arrest. And they all sign off on it to play nice and all that. But, still on the books, the U.S. Marshal is the highest authority in the land, as far as police powers are concerned.
I have a a whistleblower coming out on my other show, an FBI whistleblower, and his recommendation is to get rid of the FBI, which I don't think is ever going to happen, and then give the authority that the FBI has, or give the investigative responsibilities back to the U.S. Marshals. So that would, God, you guys would grow exponentially if that happened, to taking over all that authority. But what I'm hearing is as we grew, instead of growing you guys, they cut off pieces and specialized, and made specially agencies to handle those particular areas of concern, which is not really a bad thing. I mean, because counterfeiting is kind of a specialized kind of crime, and you can do it. You can have jack of all trade detectives do that, but that's not about ATF. Also, I mean, I don't. Of course, those guys get a bad rep because they're taking people's guns away from them, and a lot of people don't like those guys. But one of the things you said is the Oklahoma territory, and I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, but there's a new series on Paramount. It's Bass Reeves. I don't know if you guys are watching it, and it's just a whole episode. I think they're heading into season 2 regarding Bass Reeves, who's an interesting character. He was a slave, and then he was recruited into the Marshal Service at 37 years old because of his unique skills. He could speak a lot of the lingo for the native languages. And then he worked for over 30 years on the U.S. Marshals and had I would say, a stellar career. So are you guys aware of the series? Have you guys watched it? And what do you think? How about you, Robert?
No, I've seen the coming attractions and the promos for it, and I've not sat down and watched it yet.
Craig, is it on your to-do list?
I'm one of them guys that always waits for the reruns, I appreciate it more. I did see some trailers. I did see a few clips. And interestingly enough, one of our retired guys out of Texas, he was a chief deputy, David Davidson, and he's actually an extra in the movie, and you could see him walking down the street with a prostitute, or he was harassing a prostitute. And he's a well-known author. He came out with a couple books, fictional books called Putin's War, and very interesting read. I would suggest some of your viewers might want to check the book out. It's well done, very well done. So, when I texted him, I'm like, yeah, I seen you, Dave. You look good. You're probably the only real U.S. Marshal on the set, And, he's got a beard. He's got the white hair, the hat, real Texan. And he just looked the part. I mean, he said they should write you in for more scenes, So I will get to see it, just to satisfy my own curiosity of what I know about Bass Reeves. But he was a great lawman, I mean, he even arrested his own son.
I heard, yes.
Yeah. So he was a tough character,
3,000 felony arrests, operating for the most part alone in the Indian Territory. Right. It was a tough gig, and he survived. I was reading that he never got shot, but he had his hat shot off and his belt shot off. And I'm thinking, okay, that's a little too close for comfort for me. So.
And then I just found out that I share a birthday with Judge Parker, the hanging judge from Fort Smith, Arkansas,
I don't know if that's a great honor or a dubious honor. I'm not sure which one you would count that one.
When I was out there, I did visit his grave site, and very modest, nothing crazy, but they still have the gallows, constructed. Of course, they don't have the ropes hanging down. We don't want to offend any snowflakes out there, but they still have the structure set up, and they have a little podium and it gives the history. And when I was out there, this was 1988, but I had to do a detail out there. And I don't know if you remember the movie. Of course, I'm sure you do. Hang 'em High, Clint Eastwood.
Yes.
In the first opening scene, he was arrested, and and then they put him down in that dungeon. Remember, and the jailer said, I guess he was a military guy. He said, "You better find a spot because this place is going to fill up quite quickly." Excuse me. Well, when I was over there, of course, me being me, I weaseled myself down under the courthouse to check out, and I got in there, and there was the columns, where Clint Eastwood was leaning against. And I don't know if that was used exclusively in the movie or whether it was a set made, but that was what was depicted in the movie. And I was walking around there, and I was just saying to myself, boy, I wonder how many people I could be standing right here, and this guy went to the gallows and had his neck snapped. This guy, you know what I mean? Was in jail for the rest of his life. This guy killed this one. And I'm just walking around, and you could almost hear the voices, you could almost hear the chatter and the smell, you could imagine what the smell was. They gave you a bucket. They would give you a bucket and something to, this is yours. This is where you go. This is where you eat, and it's pretty neat, so.
You guys have worked lockups before, right? Or been in lockups before. And yes, you can't, describing the smell of working in a jail.
Only we would know that,
yes, it's and when you first start working in a jail, because I got put in jail when I was 21 to work there, right? Everybody gets sick because you got all these guys in there, and they all got different things, and the building's old, so there's stuff in the vents, and everybody gets sick the first year. But then I think you've been exposed to every single disease that's out there, and then you're immune for the next 40 years. So, but yeah, it's you get the what we called it it was CJ crud if you work CJ, Men's Central Jail, but you get the crud, and and then you're good, And the other thing, when we first started working the jails, they could still smoke, and so I had to oversee a dorm with 100 inmates, and so the smoke would just kind of drift downward right after dinner as they all started smoking. It was really not a fun place to work, and I'm glad that I went to patrol fairly quickly. I joined just before the Olympics, so they were pushing us out, and I managed to get out to patrol very quick. So.
Yeah, but think of the experience you gained. I started out back in '84. I worked for the Bureau of Prisons for a couple of years, and when I finally, got over to the Marshals, I was used to inmates. I was used to bad people. I knew how to handcuff. I knew how to deal with these people to a certain extent. I always thought in my mind that any law enforcement agency out there, it would be a good prerequisite to have them. They don't have to spend, a year in the jail, but they should kind of work their way through the jail system to learn and see what these correction officers have to deal with.
Two things. You learn how to talk to people.
Yes.
And you recognize their manipulation tactics. I think,
and they
people are in the criminal life. They don't change. And you got them all there in a big dorm, and you're dealing with them on a day-to-day basis. So it is for somebody who grew up in the Midwest and went to Catholic schools. I wouldn't say I was 100% sheltered, but I was definitely not exposed to the criminal element like that. And now you're managing career criminals, because in LA County we always kind of weeded the little guy out. It was just crooks and so you got used to dealing with them, and so I do agree with you, Craig. It's a learning experience, but also you never forget the smell. so
I put that out of my head years ago.
Well, so let's get on to our movie, and the movie is The Fugitive. It was released in 1993, and it stars oh my God, I'm forgetting who the main star is. It's Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones. Now I did the movie The U.S. Marshals with you guys, which is largely regarded as the sequel to The Fugitive. And we'll do the first scene. I think I just called it the murder, which kind of sets the stage. And this is actually a takeoff from a series from the 1960s called The Fugitive with the actor David Jensen. And in this first scene, the wife is murdered by the one-armed man, so to speak. And it's interesting because they kind of, they obviously end up convicting Harrison Ford's character, Dr. Kimball, of the murder. But we all know at the beginning of the movie that even though it's kind of flashbacks that you're being reminded what's going on, we all know that it's not him, right? And so the movie's all about they're chasing Kimball, who ends up getting away, and are they going to solve the murder? So you guys are. I remember watching The Fugitive on TV with David Jensen. Did you guys watch that movie? Did you watch the show? And what do you think of the movie in comparison to the television series? If you did do that, how about you, Robert? Did you watch The Fugitive, or was that a little bit before your time?
That's way before my time. You know, you got me at the movie. That's the best you're going to get from me on that one.
All right, Craig, you're my generation a little bit. How about The Fugitive, dude? The series.
Absolutely. You know, in 1960, I'm going to say 4 or 5, we took a road trip down to Florida to visit an aunt. I think she was in Fort Pierce. And every night we would watch The Fugitive. And, you know, I got so turned on to it. And I was a little cat. What was I, 8, 9 years old?
Yeah.
It was interesting. You know, I didn't understand it all. But, you know, and then I was surprised a couple of years ago when late night TV, one of them late night TVs, they had The Fugitive on, and it's still on to this day. So, yeah, you know, it kind of apples and oranges when it comes to the movie and the TV series, in my view, anyway. You know, and probably because the U.S. Marshals aren't involved in the TV series.
No, they're not. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they're not involved, but and they got to stretch the chase out over, I think, 4 seasons. They did this thing.
Well, yeah, exactly.
I was born in '62, so you know, obviously, I was watching the reruns 10 years later in the '70s, and I also like David Jansen as an actor. He was a good actor, so he played a great Dr. Kimball, constantly looking for that one-armed man like we see in the movie here, and so in this case, Dr. Kimball is. He's a surgeon, and they lay out that there's some medicine that they're looking at, which ends up kind of dovetailing into the theme here that they want to get out on the market. And it ends up being a little bit about the corruption of medicine. And God, with all the stuff going on with COVID, everybody's... You know, everybody's talking about that stuff now, and I think they're a lot more familiar with the development of medicine now and the potential corruption that goes along with the development of medicine. But that's the foundation, and the murder really is to take out Dr. Kimball, and ends up taking out his wife. But they end up taking him out anyways because he ends up getting convicted, right? And then this is the chase, and you know, there's some of the things that were interesting about this scene is, one, he does have a fight with the guy. It does sound like a far-fetched story. I was fighting an intruder with one arm, right? That is, you know, I mean, that's a Jesse Smollett story, right? It's like, really, a guy with one arm and you couldn't beat him? You know, I mean, I could see us as cops going, so I mean, I get it, you know, where these Chicago cops are, all right, right, and then of course all the evidence kind of matches up, or at least it matches up enough to where they think he's the guy who did it, right? And then his wife happens to be wealthy, although he's a surgeon. He's wealthy in his own right too. So what'd you think of the first scene, Robert?
Well, where the fight is and the one-arm guy, you see it there, so you already know the outtake of the movie, but you get frustrated in it knowing that, you know, the marshals are not going to investigate, you know, him committing that crime. They're going to investigate him to get located and arrested and go to jail. That's our job. That was the whole concept of it. But, you know, being the way it is today and how we know it, Craig and I know it, like there would be a task force and we would have Chicago PD on the task force. So there would be detectives and investigators, and they would have more insight to the actual crime itself. And it would split off, you know, with spiderweb into that.
Well, we got to defend the Chicago Police Department a little bit there. Yeah, it sounds like a far-fetched story, right?
Of course. I mean, and plus it's Chicago, right? Just like you said, Jesse Smollett, they're from there too. But
yeah, right. What'd you think of the opening scene, Craig?
You know, Bobby nailed it. Okay. First of all, the U.S. Marshals will not take over a case. Especially that it's a local or state crime. Okay, we only investigate federal crimes. However, and this is where the movie, where they didn't do it correctly, in my view, and like Bobby eloquently said, we would have a fugitive task force, consisting of, state police, Chicago PD, probation, parole, maybe a few other federal agencies that are made up of this task force. So if a state crime is committed, okay, and it's a homicide, it would be the homicide detectives that would investigate and identify, who they want to go after. And then when all else fails and they can't find the guy, they would call in the fugitive task force, whether it be a state and local fugitive task force or whether it be the U.S. Marshal's fugitive task force, which, is, and I hate to, toot my own horn, and not me, but the agency as a whole. We've been doing this since 1789, for Christ's sake. If we don't have it that nailed by now, then they may as well dissolve us. But they are the great. Look, the men and women of Marshal Service. That's what they dedicate their lives to. Besides the other tasks that they have to perform, with protecting the judiciary and all that other sort of stuff, witness protection. But the task force, is something where, okay, so they identified the homicide suspect and they identified what they believe is Kimball, okay? So now they can't find him. So what they would do is they would reach out to the U.S. Marshal's Fugitive Task Force, which we have one in Chicago, and they would say, we need you guys to adopt this case. And, we know we have representatives with, the Chicago PD on your task force, but we'd also like to bring in the homicide detectives, kind of ad hoc, to the whole scene. And let's go find this guy. They never really elaborated, even so slightly to that fact, which kind of disappointed me because it kind of makes it look like, oh, we're so cavalier. Yeah, we're going to just take over the state case, get me a helicopter,
Well, I definitely going to ask you about that because, but let's show the escape scene first, and let's talk a little bit about escapes. Now, do you guys have? Obviously, we talked about you guys have some transportation responsibility, but you guys aren't really operating buses. I mean, Caine is another one I want to do with you guys eventually. Do you guys operate planes as well? I mean, you're not really doing lockup, but do you do transportation of the criminals?
Yeah, big time. Everything from what you said is we're doing anything from a simple cage car to a plane. Just like Caine, but not. I mean, our planes are not outfitted the way Caine is. But yes, in the bus, the escape where the bus is there. Yeah, we have buses in districts that move prisoners to local jails all the time. And
so let me clarify, because the sheriff's department has the second or the third largest bus fleet in LA County, because we move 18,000 inmates every day, or maybe 10,000 inmates every day to court and then back, right? So is that your guys' mission and role? Are you partly moving people to court for hearings, or is it just to local jurisdictions? Is that part of your duties?
No, that's part of the duties as well. Yeah, we we're working in the cell block in the courthouse and doing transportation, and that's Monday to Friday and sometimes on Saturday if you have duty.
Okay, so you have buses like we saw in the movie, and it is clearly potential that you could have an accident. Have you? This was obviously, they dramatize these things and they're pretty severe. Any bus takeovers when you guys were transporting in the history, Craig, that you can remember where guys escaped from the U.S. Marshal from the bus?
Not from a bus that there have been a few incidents. I just can't recall all of them, but I do remember one, but it wasn't a bus. Somewhere out west, two deputy marshals were transporting a real bad guy to a facility, and somehow either the guy got out or they were ambushed, and they actually, and this is back in maybe the early 70s, and one thing about the Marshal Service, we deal with these people day in and day out. And, we try and treat everybody respectfully. Okay. Even the bad guy, even when they're fighting, once they're on the ground and they're cuffed, the fight's over, we get them up. And we actually had a few good go, well, I'm sorry, Marshal, stuff like that. But the point I'm trying to make is when they were ambushed, they took them out to a field where there was an oak tree, and they used their own handcuffs and handcuffed the two deputies around the tree. And one guy had the gun, and the prisoner actually said, I think his partner who helped with the ambush wanted to shoot them or something. And the prisoner said, no, these guys have been good to us. They've been nice to us. Let's just get out of here and leave it alone. That's one instance I remember. But one of the worst things that we kind of put a stop to it in New York. Two things were funerals and doctors, outside doctor appointments. Okay. Those were the ones that we always, had, like we were doing in advance. We'd send a couple, people out to check the area out, maybe even do a surveillance before the prisoner would arrive. The funerals were the worst because I think there was a deputy in D.C. I forgot his name. Maybe Washington was his last name. And he actually got shot and killed at a funeral. They brought the bad guy to visit his mom or somebody in the family who passed away. But somebody the night before put a gun in the casket. And the guy was able to go up to the casket, stick his hand in there, turn around and shoot the deputy. I could have it a little bit wrong, but it was something like that. So
amazing. And then what's the plan after that? So you shoot the guy and you're going to try and get away? It's just crazy.
It's the judges. It's a lot of these liberal judges.
Yeah.
So what we told the judges, we're not doing it anymore. Okay. However, if you want the funeral home and at the person's expense to have the funeral home come to the courthouse. All right, Bobby, I think you might have had something to do with setting up some of these things too. And there was a few where they would bring the hearse we'd bring them into the secure sally port, and just the funeral home people, the two guys in the hearse, they'd open up the back, the gate would go down, everything's secure, it's in our own sally port. We'd bring the prisoner down in handcuffs, and we'd let him see his family member, and then for 5 minutes, okay, go, say your prayer, goodbye, boom, and see you later, bye. So
that's a great compromise.
Yeah,
that's really good.
Well, we came up with that idea. I think it was out on Long Island, because they wanted us to bring a prisoner from the Long Island lockup all the way into Queens or Brooklyn. And like, it's dangerous. Well, are you out of your mind? So, these judges have no concept. They want to be the nice guy. They want to be the bleeding heart, but they don't realize the risk that they put on us. So
in the scene though, one of the things that's common whether you're local or feds is the shiv he used. So it looked like it was a sharpened toothbrush, the end of a toothbrush, Robert. So these are things that these guys end up in local jails, they end up federal prisons, but they use the same things. They create weapons in a similar way. And of course, in this case, he stabbed the deputy No, he wasn't a U.S. Marshal. He was just a transportation deputy, right? Maybe a state guy.
Right.
But he stabbed him with what would be a typical shank, right? Something that we would see in lockups throughout the United States, federal, state, or local, right? It's important to searching a guy.
Of course. And how much training have we all been through, and you see it all? And it's even showed in when you go to training and in live or on video with all the weapons that are made within the jail itself. I mean, from shaving down a toothbrush, to a comb, to the razors, and even a pen or utensil, eating utensils, and what do you expect the inmates to have? They gotta survive as well anyway, but to make all these type of weapons. And then, I patted down and searched thousands of people, throughout my career. And of course you miss something here and there, or things left in vehicles,
yes.
It gets found.
Well, what I liked about the scene is they didn't pretend like he had a real knife. He had a shiv. They showed the shiv, and which is something that's practical. I mean, it's practical for the inmates. It's something that we see every day. Obviously, if you miss it and then somebody gets hurt, of course you feel incredibly guilty if you're the guy that was supposed to be searching and and misses it. But then the bus crashes and there's a big fire and he's got to save the guy and then handcuff him so he can help the guy out. The deputy was stabbed out and he ends up saving the guy. So, we're laying the foundation that Dr. Kimball is really a really good guy, and that's the character development that they're developing here. And even the lockup guy decides to get out. Now, I did get from one of our audience, they gave me a hard time because I was defending Chicago PD. I have to. They need all the help they get. They're taking lumps every day in the newspaper and the media. So on this show, we're going to throw, an olive branch to our Chicago PD or anybody else who needs a little bit of help. But we appreciate the pushback a little bit there. And this is one of the reasons why I love doing these shows is we get to talk about law enforcement, talk about our experiences, and talk about what's right in the movie, what's wrong in the movie, and then give some clarity on what we experienced over the last, for me, 38 years and a similar kind of time frame to you guys. But so he gets away, and the next scene is Gerard arrives on the scene. So I do have a lot of questions about this, and Craig touched on some of that. So, the escape has happened. It looks like the state guys and the sheriff are trying to do their thing. And, I don't know how big the sheriff's department in that area was supposed to be. But you're right, Craig. You call out. That's not typical of federal U.S. Marshals. First of all, so let me ask, do you have U.S. Marshal teams that are generally just U.S. Marshal teams? Or for the most part, do you just you try to use task force when you're ever doing this?
Prior to 2000, and actually May, because that's when I got promoted into the first ever regional fugitive task force. But prior to that, we would have some what we call ad hoc task forces. I know Northern Ohio was one of the first, and they're still going strong today. And they did some under the Marshal, Pete Elliott. They did some phenomenal work. So prior to the Regional Fugitive Task Force, which was initiated by Congress as the first ever congressionally funded fugitive task force to go after the worst of the worst, terrorists, murders, rapists, drug dealers, you name it, we do it. There was these ad hoc task forces that we would set up within the confines of each district. And in our district in Eastern New York, we would have the NYPD with us and their warrant squad. And we would go out and, work their cases. We'd work our cases. So, we were representative as far, but, now you're getting back to that scene where, the local hillbilly sheriff there, was trying to set up a perimeter and he's going, okay, put guys over here and what's his name? Gerard, just look at him, go, you might want to go out, 2 more miles, 3 more miles. And he's like, okay. And then and then he goes, okay, put some guys. He goes, no, you might want to do that. And he goes, hands him the map. I think I haven't seen the movie in a long time, but from what I can record, kind of hands him the map. He goes, basically, you want to do this? I don't have a clue, right? So,
yeah. And, they kind of make the locals look dumb, and then Gerard kind of rolls in there and takes it over. Obviously, I've searched for a lot of people, and that you throw a big blanket and then and you kind of shrink down and look for your suspect that way. So you cast that net as far as you can, realistically with the assets you have, and then you kind of shrink it down and search the area. And if they get out, they get out. One of the things when I watch a movie or I watch, what I learned a long time ago, if you're a crook, keep going. Don't go to ground. If you go to ground and they know what they're doing, they're going to catch you. That's because if they go to ground but they're in your containment, you're going to bring in dog teams, you're going to bring in helicopters, you're going to eventually catch that guy, right? So you don't go to ground. But so Robert, task forces versus just solely U.S. Marshals, the functionality of the two. What do you think? Because this is a team that's primarily just U.S. Marshals, and they'll get help from locals and other feds. But that's what Gerard's team is here. There is a benefit to doing collaborative teams, right?
Oh my God, yeah. I think the task force is the greatest concept ever. You have to have the feds because that's where you get the money and the equipment from. But then you get the local police, like we did, like Craig and I, we worked with NYPD or Suffolk County PD or Nassau County PD. The police departments are the biggest animals in any state that you go to. It's not going to be your state police or, you know, your little county cops, but the departments. And they're the best at it. Like we had NYPD, they were the greatest detectives in the world. I mean, just the best, smartest guys and girls I ever worked with. And you need them because they're on the ground all the time. You know, federal agents, U.S. Marshals, you know, we have a lot of hats we got to wear. You know, so you could be stuck in a courthouse or doing transportation. The NYPD, they're on a beat every day. So they know the environment. So like you deal with this movie here, you got to have, you know, whatever county sheriffs are there on your task force. They know the land. They know the environment. You know, they know that area. And you need that, as well as you need the U.S. Marshals. And you're going to have other ones part of this work as well. You know, you're going to have, because of who Kimball was in the movie, being this big high profile doctor, the FBI is going to have an interest in it. The U.S. Attorney's Office is going to have an interest in it. Then you have the local DA and, you know, the local detectives. There's a lot of interest involved here. So yeah, having a task force pays off in the end.
It's just two words: force multiplier.
Yeah.
Okay? You know, that's the key. You know, there's resources that we might have to use a subpoena to get information, where if we have a Department of Corrections guy on us, on our team, which we'd had, and we needed jail records, all it takes is a phone call and we have that information right at our footsteps, you know. And the same with the OIG in New York City. If we needed something from, you know, Department of Education or trying to get some records for some family members' children where they might be, and, you know, they're giving us a hard time, bing, we just make that call from that department, and next thing you know, we got the information. All right, this guy, yeah, he moved. He has children enrolled in Staten Island now. Okay, good. We didn't have that address before, you know. So yeah, force multiplier, and just a wealth of information from other agencies that we would have to, you know, jump through hoops to get.
You know, I one of the things I did in my career, believe it or not, I did mountain search and rescue for about 2.5 years. And it was interesting because it lays out what you're talking about, terrain, the knowledge of the terrain. And depending on where the person was hiking or the person went in at, there's only certain places that normally they would go. A human being would go down this trail and that trail. And my team, my mountain search and rescue guys, who were all pretty much volunteers. I mean, they were deputies, sworn deputies, but they worked for $1 a year, and they knew their area. It was in the San Gabriel Mountains, the Angeles National Forest, and we had the federal police there. It was a federal, I forget what they called them, but they were the rangers, right, for federal land, but they were far and few between, right? I mean, they know it, but they just didn't know it as well as even these search and rescue guys. And that's what you're talking about. So if you partner with the locals, they know the terrain, they know the players probably better than the feds, because the feds are jacks of all trades, so to speak, on areas, and these guys are specialists for the area. Now, if you take the New York cop and put him in LA, it's going to be a duck out of water, right? You need to partner with the LA cops. But I did have some question on this scene. So what is the criteria for the U.S. Marshal? It's just a phone call. Hey, we need your help, right? But is there a process they have to go through as well? Is there a memo they have to write? Is it just a phone call? We need the task force on this guy. Or does he have to be declared a federal fugitive? Do you go through that kind of process?
Oh yeah, it's all administrative, and it's not a lot of paperwork, but there is, like Craig said earlier, MOUs in place, you know, and there's just a working relationship that was developed over the years since the task force started it back in New York. And in the beginning, yes, it's a phone call, and that's how it happens. It's an immediate phone call from, well, I got to use the NYPD language. So it's an immediate phone call from a sergeant on the task force who is reaching out to me because I'm the supervisor, going, you know, the shit hit the fan, get everybody, we're on it now. Like, you're going, it's snapping a finger. And we love that. It's an adrenaline rush. So then from there, that's me then calling Craig, and then he's calling everybody else. And we're all meeting, and we're picking a spot that we're meeting. And it doesn't matter where we work in the task force, of what areas or what boroughs. If it's in Brooklyn, everybody's meeting at whatever precinct in Brooklyn that the sergeant who initially made the phone call to me and everybody else, that's how it starts. And when you get there, there's hundreds of us waiting to go, and we're being told. And unfortunately, the biggest example for us is that if it's a cop shooting, that we're all responding and we're all on it, because the bosses from the upper echelon of NYPD pushed it down and said, some chief said, I want the task force handling this. And that was it. So then it goes, and then, now it's on, for me with the Marshal Service, it's my responsibility to make sure that it gets put into the database and the system, that we're adopting this case, we're working with it, with the locals, and we're 100% in. And it happens. It just happens.
Yeah, I would be that chief saying, all right, get the task force going. I want these guys on. And, usually when that happens, it's because you develop the credibility. And so, the sheriff's warrant has their own warrant detail or fugitive detail. But we work with all the feds, and it would be that phone call. Hey, we need to get this guy in custody. And you're right, particularly if it's a cop killer. But there is a process. You guys have to put them into the federal system. And that automatically gives you authority. You're going to do it on a handshake anyways, but you do have a process you go through. I think that's where I was getting at.
Well, you see, you got to realize too that these folks, like whether they're from the LA County Sheriff or whether they're from LAPD or NYPD or Chicago PD, those people who are assigned to the task force, they are deputized as Special Deputy U.S. Marshal, and they take a lot of pride in that. Okay, it means nothing to us because we're U.S. Marshal, but listen, if you're a local guy and you got the credit that you're a Special Deputy U.S. Marshal, they love that shit. Okay, and not only do they love it and take pride in it, but it gives them the power and authority to cross state lines. Okay, to go after that fugitive without making a phone call. Go, oh, this is Detective so and so from the LA County Sheriff's. We have a guy in Oregon, a guy that we believe went to Oregon or something. Stand down. We'll take care of it. Blah 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 blah. When there's Special Deputy U.S. Marshal, they go, hey, Special Deputy U.S. Marshal, we got task force. We got a guy in Oregon. We're going to be coming into your area. This is a courtesy call. You know what I mean? And they can't say, don't come into our area. They're going to go pound sand somewhere coming in, But to make another point, the only time that we would circumvent, let's say there was some kind of shooting or some kind of really egregious crime, and there was one agency, and I'm not going to mention their names,
Okay.
Forever bothering Italians, we used to call them in New York. But, when there was a big press case, what they would do is they would circumvent the process by going to a judge and getting a UFAP warrant. Understand what a UFAP warrant is. You would know this, but your audience might not. UFAP is just a term for unlawful flight to avoid prosecution.
Yes, that's what I'm
It's
looking
not
for.
a jailable. It's so silly though. It's not a jailable offense where if you catch the guy, okay, you're going to jail for UFAP.
It's just a probable cause warrant, basically.
Yes,
Right?
The feds, it's a federal warrant, and it allows us to, and we use it once in a while, especially when we believe a guy's in Mexico or Canada or in Europe. We'll file for a UFAP, but the other agency was known for that because this way they could get into the press and make a big press statement.
I think that agency is under a lot of fire these days. I think I know which agency you're talking about there, Craig, and I appreciate your effort to be kind to them. So.
No, they're great guys, most of them. Okay, really.
And I would agree with that. Yes, I would agree with that. I work with them as well.
So
it's the senior leadership's kind of gotten some problems.
Yeah.
So okay.
The Marshal Service has its problems too. Don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah, no. Every large agency does. Absolutely. let's go into the ambulance scene. But as we go into the ambulance scene, I wanted to talk a little bit about so helicopter access. One of the things they show in the movie, and I'm like, okay, I came from a big agency. We had a lot of resources, but I couldn't snap my fingers and get whatever I wanted. The planes are down. We got this, there's air, the wind is, it seems like Gerard just, whatever he wants, he gets, and these guys are jumping and, and I, so tell me this character, Gerard, and his access to resources. Obviously it's compressed for the movie and it's entertaining, but is it realistic, Robert?
Just ask Ledogar.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is it realistic?
I'm telling you, Bobby would get a helicopter one way or the other. If he wanted.
I laugh every time I hear that one too, and Craig knows it. It's unrealistic, but it happens, and it happened on a case I had. We were investigating some perps out of Florida, wanted in Florida, and they were in Queens. And one of the NYPD guys said, "Hey, do you want a helicopter? Because we were going to hit a house." And I'm like, "I don't care." He goes, "Well, I know somebody in aviation and they need flight time."
Oh God. Yes.
And the helicopter went up. You know how much money that cost?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I got in so much trouble. You can't even put your hands around it. I mean, I had from the chief down ripping me apart. I'm like, so when I saw that movie and I see that part, I laughed my ass off.
We had on the sheriff's department. Go ahead and roll the ambulance scene, Martine. But we had, yes, on the LA County Sheriff's Department, there was criteria for what you could use a helicopter for. And yes, I did, order helicopters to get involved in activities, or they just put themselves on the activity grant and we used them as a resource. But it's very expensive so just snap your fingers, say, "I need a helicopter now." That's so unrealistic. And it also it belies the fact, it indicates, I got to be there because I don't trust that everybody else is going to do their job. I think that kind of bothers me about. I mean, I like his character because he's the Dudley Do Right, I'm going to get my man kind of guy, right? And but the realistic to just drum up a helicopter like that, and for just dramatic effect, we're chasing the ambulance here. So Kimball has gone to a hospital. He knows hospitals. He's patched himself up, and he understands if you go to the emergency room, sometimes you're going to get an ambulance that has the keys in it, and he takes off. And they, of course, figure out that Kimball was at the hospital. And it was interesting how they linked it. Do you remember how they linked it? The guy that he saved on the bus, the custodial officer, went to that hospital and was getting treated, and Kimball had shaved his beard off, but he still recognized him. And he said, "Hey, so that's how they linked it." So I thought that was interesting. I do like, because how in normal life, you wouldn't necessarily link it like that. It'd be, it wouldn't be that tight. The storytelling wouldn't be that tight, but this is movies and we have to have drama. And of course we got the helicopter. Here's another thing. They're sitting down in front of the car to try and stop it. Like this scene right here. I've never seen it. I've seen helicopters come low. I've seen helicopters land and guys get out and get involved in a fight. I've seen that kind of stuff, but I've never seen a helicopter kind of put themselves in front of a car on the roadway. I don't think they're allowed to do that. But so, anyways, if you want to speak to the scene there, Craig.
Yeah, that's George Papard and the A-Team. First of all, you got a multi-million-dollar machine, okay, and you're going to land your helicopter in front of a guy that might have nothing to lose. You don't know his mindset. Not only that, but think of if he decides to crash into that helicopter. I got nothing to lose. I'm going to go to jail for the rest of my life. I may as well take out the whole scene. Boom, you hit that helicopter, big explosion. You got, 10 dead cops on the street, So, and not only that, it's a public safety concern also. So, like you said, Chief, it's a movie, you want to have the entertainment. You want to keep the audience captivated, blah, blah, blah. But, unrealistic. Definitely.
Yeah, and the scene they end up chasing him through a water drain, and then he jumps off a water spill for a dam. And of course I'm thinking, no way he's going to survive that. But of course this is Dr. Kimball. He can survive anything, and he survives. And he does go through this grade. And so I think that kind of brings up, sometimes you get these guys who they could do a lot of things you wouldn't think, like go through that water grade. I wouldn't have thought that right away, right? But those things happen. They secrete themselves in areas that you would not normally think, and you don't really know until you find them, right?
Well, look.
What's the most unusual place you found somebody, Craig?
Oh God. Well, first of all, you're talking about Han Solo here from
Yeah.
Star Wars. I mean, you could do anything, but we had a whole host. I mean, there was a guy that had a fake, he had one of them back in the late 80s, early 90s. Remember the old TV before the flat screen TV? It was like a console TV. Well, there was nothing in the TV except, a place for him to hide. And we're searching the whole house. And, his mother's saying, well, he was here. I didn't hear him leave him. We just went through the whole house. And we ended up leaving. And when we actually did get him a couple of days later, he goes, "Ah, you idiots, I was watching you through the TV screen." He was inside the set, And there was another guy that makes this one. There's two more good ones. One guy crawled under the kitchen sink and he nestled himself behind the pipes. It was one of them old Brooklyn brownstones where there's a million pipes coming under the kitchen cabinets and stuff. He nestled himself in there. And, we opened up the closet door, and there he was wedged between the pipes, and he wouldn't get out. He said, "I'm stuck. I can't get out." No. So what we did was we pulled up a couple of the kitchen chairs. Me and my partner sat in front of the cabinet, and we turned on the hot water. And before you know it, he miraculously freed himself after that pipe got hot. Then the other one was, this was pretty ingenious now. This guy knew he was wanted. He kept beating up his mother and aunt, who he lived with out on Long Island. They would call the cops. The cops would come. They'd search house. They couldn't find him. They go, "He's here. He's here." They went through that whole house. They couldn't find him. So we got called in, and we hit the house, and the aunt saying, "He just punched me in the eye. He's here. He didn't leave." And we're searching. You guys don't know what you're doing. This is our first time here. So we searched the whole house. We couldn't find the guy. I mean, we went through the attic. We went through everything. So one of the troopers went into the bathroom, I guess, after, a couple hours in the house looking for this guy. I guess he had to relieve himself. He goes and washes his hands at the sink. And, there's a vanity mirror. And he's looking at it. It's a little crooked, So for some reason, I don't know what possessed him to do this. One of the troopers, that is, he goes and moves the mirror like this, and then the mirror moves like this, and he grabs the mirror and tugs on a little bit, and it tugs back, and he's having a tug of war with this mirror. And he calls us all in. We go in there, we grab each end of the mirror, we pull it out, the whole vanity. And what this guy did was he took the mirror out. He had lag bolts on the inside of the metal part of the mirror on the inside. And what he would do is he had a hollowed out crawl space in the wall. And when the cops would come, he'd jump onto the counter by the sink. He'd pull the mirror off. He'd go into the crawl space, and then with the two lag bolts, he'd pull the mirror back into place. And that was like ingenious. Who'd think of doing stuff like that? So,
well, the smart ones get away for a long time. So, and we got a new name for our actor here. It's Dr. Richard Indiana Solo.
Yeah.
So Robert, I got a question from the audience. I figure I'll throw it at you. Have you ever gone to Europe or Asia on an extradition?
Yeah, I went both. I was in. I had to go to Thailand to get a guy, and I also went to England.
Okay.
To grab somebody. Yeah.
Well, the Thailand story would be interesting to me. How was that? And did you have to go to the lockup, or did they just have them at the airport for you?
When you go, the flight was terrible because it took 2 days, I think. When you go there, we have to connect them we have to go to the U.S. Embassy and do a bunch of paperwork. Then we'll meet the local cops or whatever law enforcement we're dealing with. and they'll ask you if you want to go with them to the jail or meet them at the precinct or the station house, or just meet at the airport. We prefer just meet at the airport and change out there. And that's usually what I did, I believe, in Thailand. Same as in England, And I also did one. It was funny. I was just talking to a friend the other day. We went to the Bahamas to get a guy, and that guy was begging us to get him out of there because he said the jail was terrible. That there was nothing there for them, and I thought it would be great. I'm like, God, it must be awesome being locked up in the Bahamas. No. And he couldn't get out of there quick enough. And I remember when we were changing him out in the airport bathroom, I wound up giving him my toothbrush and toothpaste and soap to wash up because the guy smelled that bad.
Oh my God!
Yeah, so he was washing up in the airport bathroom before we left.
Well, so hey, to our audience, you got your question answered, and I think somebody is a fan of yours there, Robert. They're talking about your voice and other things. And there was a question: what kind of guy was he there, Craig? The guy that was using the lag bolts to hide behind the vanity. What kind of suspect was he?
Now, can we?
He was just
wait.
Oh yeah, we got to do. Oh, sorry, you're right. We got to do our break. Go
ahead. I think we can answer the question and then go to the other break.
Okay, so what kind of suspect was he?
He was just a white male, never worked a day in his life, who mooched off his mother and aunt out on Long Island. Just a typical run of the mill skell. Useless piece of crap. Okay, that's the only way I could put it.
Okay, Martine, I think we're ready for our break.
Meet the Seattle Vigilante. Like so many comic heroes, this warrior hides his identity. But his identity isn't the only secret he has to keep. After grievous wounds received during combat, Tier 1 operator John Russell begins to recover and comes to terms with his new reality of being an amputee. And as he learns how to use his new prosthetic limb, he finds himself caught up in the bureaucratic red tape that too many wounded veterans experience, the exhausting medboard process. Out of sheer frustration, John takes it out on the criminal scum of the city. But when reality kicks in, John realizes he started something that's having an impact on the greater world around him, and thus has to reevaluate his motives. And moreover, just how far is John willing to go to finish this war he's declared against the criminals in Seattle? And will he even survive? From the creator of IDW's award-winning graphic novel Code Word Geronimo comes a new story about a different kind of warrior, Vindicated Inc., the first of its kind disabled veteran action hero comic. The Vindicated Inc. graphic novel crowdfunding campaign on fundmycomic.com is provided in the description of this video. We hope you become a contributor. Please share this link. Thank you.
Hey, I appreciate it, guys. Go to fundmycomic.com and take a look at that, and consider helping the owner of the channel fund this effort. And so here's the one thing about the scene is Gerard lost his gun in that scene, right? And Kimball had the drop on there for a while, and he didn't shoot him. And this begins to set the mindset in Gerard that, okay, this isn't your average killer because he had the drop on me. He's trying to get away, but he didn't kill me. And also earlier he says, I didn't kill my wife. And of course, Gerard says, I don't care. That's not what I'm here for, which is really what you guys are saying. Hey, I'm not interested in the drama. I just want you in custody again, right? That's your gig. That's your job, right? And, but it does, you could see it's planting the seed in Gerard that there's something more to this story. Maybe the locals missed it. Maybe he's not the bad guy. But what I wanted to get into, because there are two guys that escaped from that bus. One was Kimball, and one was the guy who set up the escape. And they're looking for both of them. But they go through a process. You hear Gerard in his office, and he's talking about, and I think I listed it as fugitive back ground process or the investigative process. Go ahead and show that clip there, Martine. And so you guys, he's given instructions. Okay, check out his background, check out the case. So walk us through the process that you do when you're looking for a high-profile warrant suspect that needs to get in custody, what is there's a basic process you probably go through looking at family, friends, and known associates. Just talk about that process. I'll start with you, Robert.
Oh man, you do a full history check on the person, on everything. I mean, you're going far back as to even, school. It depends on the age of the person, especially like for Kimball, you want to know about, who he went to medical school with, who his friends are, of course, all the family, even the in-laws, any business associates, any companies, anything he's involved with. So you're digging a hole, pulling up anything you can get, whatever you can get out of that from the dirt and the shovel you want. There's not enough information that you can have on anybody that you're looking for. And then, all of the utilities and the things he owns, his house, his car, the boat, anything you can get.
So it's because any thread could be the thread that you need to unravel this and find out where he's at. That's kind of what you're saying at this point, right? And but you start at the most recent and you move your way out in terms of information. Would that be accurate?
Oh, of course. And somebody's going to give you some kind of information that's going to help out you find his location, and that's what you're looking for. You want the location of where he's at. I mean, this movie's so old compared to what we would do today with social media. Thank goodness for cell phones for law enforcement today. I mean, that's your lottery ticket on any one of these perps. For us, Craig, going back, working the street, you had to work the street. We didn't have cell phones. It was before beepers. We would rely on a payphone, trying to get information and tracking things down. And, even the history of a car, the license plate, look at everything today is great. You have Easy Pass and license plate readers.
Yep.
We didn't have that back in the day.
We had a vicious murder out here in the city of San Dimas. It was one of the areas that I was responsible for. And I used to be a really big advocate of license plate reader. I was getting money for the region from Homeland Security grants, and I was encouraging the placement of them. And some cities took it, we had all these social justice warriors pushing back at that. The ACL was pushing back at it, but Beverly Hills police ignored it. So we had this murder in San Dimas. The sheriff's, that's our area, the sheriff's area, LA County. They identified the car. They put the car in the system, and he ended up in Beverly Hills, the bad guy. And he hit one of those automated license plate readers, alerted Beverly Hills that they had this wanted felon in their area, and they took him down. And once they took him down, he had the gun in this car, and he's good for 3 other murders of homeless people. I mean, that's the value of technology today. And we have all these people pushing back. Oh, no, it's privacy. It drives me crazy because the technology just allows us to be more efficient and effective at what we do. I don't care what, some unknown guy is doing, behind his wife's back. I don't care about any of that. I just want to catch the bad guy. And that's what the technology really allows us to do. And so, Craig, we do these background checks, but how have, Robert alluded to it, how have cell phones helped make it easy? Because nobody wants to get rid of their cell phone. And it is like a leash, an electronic leash to them that helps you find the guy. And the second thing I want you to answer about the scene. So first talk about the cell phone, and then they end up taking the black guy's girlfriend in custody for harboring him. So talk about both those issues.
Well, the cell phone thing has always been a touchy subject with us because we were pretty much the premier law enforcement agency to really, and there were 2 guys, we used to call them Huff and Cuff, and this was the day of the beeper. That's when it all started. Prior to that, we would have to go to the phone company and actually get a subpoena to look over MUDs and LUDs and toll records, phone call records and things like that, which is tedious, time consuming. But, the bad guy didn't have the cell phones and things the electronic platforms that they have today. So, it was a very guarded secret of how we use that technology. And I still don't, I was I had to do an interview with the last escape a while back, and I think it was in Pennsylvania, and it was on Fox News, and they were asking me. The girl asked me, "Oh, I want to get into. How do you find fugitives?" I just said, "That's a secret, you know. I'm not gonna, I'm not opening my toolbox for you to, And she didn't know whether to smile, laugh, or like, And I got a whole bunch of comments like, "Yeah, great, thank you for not, But it's all out of the bag. These people cannot help. They just can't help themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they have to talk on the phone. That's like, and I always said when I talk to like a couple of John Gotti's guys, and I go, what's with you guys? I mean, you can't not help yourself and talking on the phone. And he's like, Marshal, it's just the way it is, and I'm like, yeah, and that's why you're going to prison for life, Just guys can't help yourselves, So, look, with the advent of the cell phone, we used to do what's called a DNIS, okay, back in the day, and it was really ingenious how John Cuff and this, the other guy came up with this idea. A DNIS is an acronym for dialed number search, okay? And before the cell phones, everybody had pagers, okay? The pager would go off, they'd look at the number, and they dial the number. They just couldn't help themselves, especially the drug dealers. So what we would do is we'd have our guys in headquarters. They were called ESU at the time, Electronic Surveillance Unit. Now they're called TOG, Technical Operation Group. We would have them. We'd get a subpoena. You have to get a subpoena. We get a subpoena. I don't know if we needed a subpoena for that. I'm not sure. But whatever we did, we would dial the guy's number and put in our headquarters number, which was like an 800 number, and we put 911 after it because 911 was the code. Oh, it's important call me. These guys couldn't help themselves. They get on the thing. Yeah, you did need a subpoena. That's right. They see the number 911. Oh, look, they call it, and all they get is a busy signal. So then they go to the next pay phone or house phone or whatever. They dial it again, get another business signal. In the interim, while they're calling into that, we're actually tracking that signal to where the phone is. Okay, and we call the phone company up. Okay, yeah, we locked onto it. He's calling from the house, a landline on 266th Street. They give us the whole subscriber information, and we lights and siren. We head to that location, and one last time, 800 number up. Yep, he's still there. Boom, hit the house. We get him. Of course, that's all gone now because nobody has beepers anymore. So once the cell phones came out, then we started doing a few of the tricks of the trades with the cell phones. Who knows what's going to be the future holds? We never thought that there was going to be a Captain Kirk flip phone at some point in time. At least when I started.
Well, it's just so interesting. Everybody's got to have that phone, and even they know it's detrimental to them, and they still carry it. So hey, address harboring a fugitive. So they end up taking the black guy's wife or girlfriend to jail here. Address that issue and that charge. What does that mean? What are the elements?
Well, look, it's twofold. Okay, one is if you really believe, look, somebody comes to my house looking for my family member. Am I going to help them? I don't know. I never was put in that position, but I could understand. You don't want to give up your mother, your brother, your father, your sister, or a good friend or whatever. But if you actually know that they're giving them money, they're funding them, or they're harboring them in some way, well, first of all, that's a crime punishable by 5 years. Okay, aiding and abetting the federal fugitive, harboring, that's a crime. So most U.S. attorneys, they don't want to get involved with that. They felt that they even if they did give us a warrant for that, usually they're out that day. Okay, out on their own recognizance or a minimal bond, and they appear before the judge after the fugitives court, unless it's a real, like I say, a real horrible, egregious type crime, and they're directly involved. I'm not talking about giving somebody a few bucks to, go buy McDonald's while you're on the run and stuff. I'm talking about really substantially aiding and abetting, but also it's a nut twister. Okay. Now I got you in handcuffs. You're going to go to jail for 5 freaking years. You want to give up your life, your 5 years of your life, and it's all how you talk to these people. You know, you got to try and reason with them on their level. Okay, hey, you got 2 young kids. You're going to jail. You're going to jail right now.
That's a legal term, nut twister, right? You know, so, so you're putting a little pressure on him. Well, in this scene, he ends up getting the gun from the U.S. Marshal, and Gerard saves the day and shoots him. I imagine at a shooting, you're going to take anybody who's harboring the person to jail, but also there's still got one guy that's outstanding. So you're talking, hey, we don't know if she knows or doesn't know, so we're going to take her in custody. But what I'm hearing you say is generally, if they've only gone so far, it's just going to be, you're going to do a slap on the wrist and let them go. That's what I'm hearing. Is that accurate, Craig?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it probably wouldn't happen until the guy's in custody.
Yeah.
You know, and the couple of times we did it, I really believed one woman, she really didn't know where he was. She really, she had no clue that he was wanted. And I ended up believing her, and it actually turned out to be true. But there was a bunch of other cases where, you know, NYPD charged them, not us, you know, because it was a task force case, and it was a local PD case, and they charged the person. And you know, like I say, you know, there was a woman, you know, she put up the bond on her house, and this was a federal case. And you know, I said to the U.S. Attorney's Office, this woman put up the bond on the house. She knows where this guy is. This guy was a Colombian drug dealer, and she wouldn't give up. She wouldn't give up any information. She would lose the house. I go to the U.S. Attorney's Office and I said, let's get an order to seize the house, you know? And they were very reluctant to do that. You know, well, you know, you're going to put somebody out on the street. I go, hey, they signed a bond saying that this guy will show up for court. And the guy reneged. They're playing dumb and stupid. But then we found out that the cartel actually gave her the money to buy the house where they were running the drugs out of. So, you know, she was covered. She wasn't losing any money. And second of all, she was like, you're going to have me killed, you know? And, you know, pretty much kind of like Gerard said, I don't care, you know? I mean, I didn't want her to get killed, of course, but, you know, that's what you got to say, you know? And she wouldn't give up beans, boy. She held, later on, we found out the guy got locked up in Ecuador, and he was doing time in Ecuador. So, you know, he did flee the United States, but, you know, these cartels and big drug runners, they'll actually buy a stash house or buy a house. And then if they do get arrested, they will use that as collateral to get out of jail. And, you know, if you lose the house, write it off as drug money, you know? So
I think the thing, so locals can do that. They can take people to jail too. But what I'm hearing from you, Craig, and that's not unusual, is many of our foreign fugitives, they might fear going home more than being arrested here.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and because while they could be killed by their crime partners or in custody in other countries, sometimes isn't as pleasant as it's hard to believe isn't as pleasant as being in the United States, because we have this thing called the Constitution where we got to give you certain constitutional rights, and they don't have those at other places. And so, I mean, the next scene is the smartest man investigates. So he's starting to investigate his own crime here. But one of the other things that you guys have had to been on the tail of somebody that just seemed to be one step ahead of you guys. And I was hoping to hear your story. So Kimball is a smart guy. He's one step ahead of Gerard. He's getting away from Gerard fairly regularly. Robert, were you ever on the tail of somebody that just seemed to be one step ahead of you? You hit a place and he's gone. You hit another place and he's just left. And he just seems to have intuition, or he's just a smart guy and he knows not to stay somewhere too long. You know, tell us, did you have a situation like that, and what kind of case was it?
Oh yeah, and it was actually a sad case. It was parental kidnapping, international parental kidnapping, and the woman was from somewhere in Asia, and wound up coming to America and then marrying a guy out in Long Island. and I was a day behind her on every corner we turned. And when we went to the house the one day, knowing where her address was, missed her by an hour. And she had her daughter with her, and they were trying to flee the country, flee to America to get back overseas. But thank goodness for technology today, because we had cell phones, and we have the contacts and our partners at the airport, so I was able to reach out to those guys, and give them the information, because here I am stuck in traffic, in freaking Long Island, trying to get to Queens to JFK, and it's 12 miles, but it's going to take me 2 hours. And thank goodness we were able to make phone calls and do emails and text messaging, and it was the guys at the airport that actually were able to grab her and rescue the daughter. And it was other people that I was able to send to the airport to pick them up and then bring them to the courthaus. But yeah.
But it wasn't happenstance. She knew she had to keep moving. She knew she could.
Yeah.
So she's a smart lady, but probably not a good lady, but a smart lady, and understand that she needed to just keep moving. And that's what I said. If they're looking for you, keep moving. Because if you go to ground, they're going to find you. Yeah. Greg, your story. Who's the smartest person that always seemed to be just one step ahead of you? What kind of case was that?
Well, there was quite a few. For me, one of the biggest cases that I did was an international terrorist. His name was Stefano Procopio. In 1980.
Cool name. Go ahead.
Yeah, cool name. Bad dude. Very bad dude. What happened was they were part of a group of the Red Brigade. They called themselves the Nuclei Revolutionary Armati. And I could be pronouncing that a little wrong, but my Italian isn't that good these days. But anyway, they detonated a bomb at the Bologna train station. And this was like big news back in 1980. On a Saturday afternoon, August 2nd at like 10:30 in the morning. The place was packed. 85 people instantaneously got killed. The roof collapsed. The trains got blown up. 285 other people were seriously wounded. And when they identified the first group to escape, was one of them was Stefano Procopio, who was a high-level ranking member. And they were tracking him. He was always one step ahead of everybody. And I'm talking about that. A lot of it to this day is still classified by the Italian government. So he was one step ahead of everybody. And why I'm bringing this out is it wasn't actually he was one step ahead of me, because, I was still working repossessing cars in 1980. So I wasn't in law enforcement at the time. But he made it what they call the Odessa Trail. This is right out of the movies. I mean, you can read about this. And then they got these fraudulent passports, made it to Greece. From Greece, they made it through the UK. From the UK, they made it to a terrorist training camp in Lebanon. From there, and this is while the investigator, and this was one of Europe's, this is, before Al-Qaeda, before ICE, before any of this stuff. This was one of Europe's most deadliest bombings. And you can look it up. It's called the Bologna train station massacre. So he was one step ahead of law enforcement. And I'm not talking about local, I'm talking about all of Europe was looking for this guy and his cohorts. They made it to France. They got in a shootout with the French police. A French cop got killed. They disappeared again. They tracked him back into, I don't know whether it was Lebanon or another one of them countries over there in the Mideast, and he disappeared. Somehow the Italian authorities talked to the mother, and the mother in Italy of Stefano Procopio said, I don't even know where he is. I haven't seen him in years. So somehow they thought he was here in the U.S. because they pulled the mother's phone records and found out that she was calling New York quite a few times. So make a long story short, Interpol, who we were the lead agency for, everybody thinks Interpol is like man from Flint, running around with the briefcase with the machine gun and all that. There's no Interpol agent, so to speak. It's just an international police force that they send leads to different countries, host, countries that are joined with Interpol to look for their people. So it was an Interpol arrest warrant out of Italy. And basically the U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn said, hey, we got friends over in Italy, and they're asking us to, help them out with this cold case, And I was the only one at the office at the time, and the guy goes, can you do this? And I go, yeah, I could do it. I don't know what I'm going to get out of it. And I found out that they actually sent it to customs before that, and they couldn't come up with squat. So the U.S. attorney said, hey, you guys are the fugitive hunters. Can you find the guy? So I'm like, okay. So going back, what I did was I said, okay, I'm going to get a reverse trap and trace on the mother's phone in Italy. And I'm going to find out who she's calling, where she's calling, when she's calling. I no sooner got that trap and trace hung, but with a court order, that the phone calls were coming in. She was calling 2 locations, one in Tribeca, which is like Greenwich Village area, and one in the Bronx. So it was, we did a surveillance, and we kind of seen this guy that resembled Procopio coming out of an apartment building on Greenwich Street, but he disappeared into a cab. And if you're familiar with that area, or if you're not, it's a sea of cabs. Okay, so we had the Italian police requested to come into New York once we located 2 addresses. I think they're called a Cabinetary or something like that. And one guy got sick in the van with heat stroke. We had to take him to the hospital so we had to break off the surveillance. The next day I said, listen, he's at 1 or 2 locations. So we had had a team of about 20 people. Like I said, we at that time we had the ad hoc task force with NYPD. So it was like just a matter of call, hey, I need help. We got this terrorist. Now we find out President Clinton's coming into town. So the heliport is not even 5 minutes from where, the main target location that we think he's at is. So I go, I got to call the Secret Service and let them know, but I'm not canceling this operation. So Secret Service was like, I go, listen, we got a terrorist. We think we got him located. We're going to hit the place tomorrow morning. I know the president's coming into town. I don't need to know anything about him, but this is where this location is. They go, can we come? Can we supply a CAT team? So I'm like, yeah, sure. So their CAT team is that counter assault team. And they put snipers up on the roof, blah, blah, blah. So we had 2 locations, the one in the Bronx and the one in Greenwich Village. We had guys staking out the Bronx apartment, and we're staking out the Greenwich apartment. And it's across from De Niro's restaurant, called the Tribeca Grill. So it was like a nice early May day. We had a couple of our deputy marshals and NYPD, a couple of girls, dressed, they took their raid jackets off. They're sitting there having a little cappuccino on the outside thing, which is a direct line of sight with the front door of the apartment. We had guys in the Bronx. Next thing we know, we get a call from the Bronx unit saying, hey, there's a woman. She got into a Jeep with jersey tags, and she's heading down the FDR Drive. So I go, okay, follow her. We don't know where she's going. They follow her. I go, don't get made, please. Okay. They pull up to the location where we believe he is. And she's just sitting out there in her Jeep. And next thing I know, we also had, see, this is the beauty of having NYPD with us. It's a one-way street. So they called the Department of Sanitation, and they said, hey, can you get a truck out here and put up a few cones and block that street off, make like you're working, They said, sure. So they went out there. They had the street blocked off. We're down the other one way. And sure enough, she's sitting out in this Jeep, and all of a sudden, this guy comes out of the apartment, and the people in the Tribeca Grill goes, that's him. Right. And we're like, holy shit, can't believe it. Right. This guy's been on the lam since 1980. Nobody could find him. And he's right in front of our eyes. I go, hit the location. And people, this was something like out of the movie, the TV series NYPD Blue. Cars coming from every direction. We had the DEA with us. We had Customs, NYPD, and a few other different agencies. And we hit him as he's coming out of the apartment, and he's going into the Jeep to grab some boxes. And I'm like, over the radio, don't let him get his hands on them boxes, because we didn't know what was in the boxes,
Right.
So after a brief struggle, he went down, and we handcuffed him, threw him in one of the cars. And this is the fun part of the story, why I wanted to tell you this story. So now I'm standing there, everybody was shaking hands, good job. And we see all these people that clapping and snapping pictures. There's the Japanese tourists, they're snapping pictures and stuff. And one of them comes up and they're like, wow, that was a great scene. It looked so real, And I'm like, what are you talking about? They go, De Niro's restaurant, I'm like, oh, yeah. That was a great scene. They go, when's De Niro coming out? So I go, oh, he's getting his makeup put on now for the next scene. Stick around. We just got in the car and took off. Everybody's clapping and stuff. So, this guy was once, and they were relentless. And why I'm bringing it up is they were relentless. They never let this guy out of his sight. So many people got injured and killed. And it's actually like a national remembrance day in Italy to this day.
Well, it was, and these leftists from the 70s and 80s, they had a network of other leftists that supported them, which is probably what you're talking about. And I'm glad you told that story, because I think we have forgotten that we had these leftist terrorists that operated in our country and throughout Europe for years. And I'm familiar with the organizations that you're talking about, with the Weather Underground here in the U.S., and the Red Brigade, and you name it. And, so we did have a question. Was Interpol with you? My assumption is Interpol is just a managing agency. It was just the Italians that were with you that really wanted this guy in custody. Would that be accurate?
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah. So Interpol just kind of brings everybody together, I think. And they don't necessarily have investigators that come out. It would just be the local or the police agency that's most concerned that I would think come out. But so we do have Gerard. I got to update us on the movie here. So Gerard has gone to the hospital, right?
I just want to show you one thing real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
If you could see that.
Oh, is that him?
Yeah, that's him.
Good for you, man. You kept it. Good for you. Yeah.
Bobby actually got that for me, because I said, "Your hook to get me that wanted poster back."
Got the terrorist in custody. Yes, yeah. But so in the movie, our Dr. Kimball has gone to the hospital. He's researched what he thinks is the prosthetic for the one-armed man. He's got it narrowed down to a few people, and he's whittling off his list. He manages to get this information and gets out of the hospital. And one of the places he visits is a guy in custody. He finds out that one of the guys with the prosthetic is in jail. So he's assuming because the guy's in jail, that's probably his suspect. I mean, that's what we would think right away, right? And he goes and checks him out. And while he's going to try and visit with him in the jail, which is pretty unusual, Gerard is also narrowed down this list by figuring out that Kimball had visited the prosthetics department at the Chicago Memorial there, and he's got kind of a similar list, and they both end up at the same place at the same time. What I liked about this, and it's something that I've seen in my career, and is what Dr. Kimball does, which is so typical of what a crook does. Sometimes they plan it ahead of time, but other times they just do it. And I can see a smile on Robert's face, so he's probably knowing where I'm going with this. And that is, as the guy is trying to get away, he changes his appearance, right? So he manages to get out of the jail here when he visits this guy, and he blends into it. And according to my research, he actually did blend into the St. Patrick's Day parade. It was a real parade. They filmed at the real parade, but he changed his appearance, which is, there are guys I have arrested, they'll have multiple layers of clothes on. They'll do a robbery and they'll take the first layer off so they look different, right? And Kimball knows to do that, and he does that as he enters and he changes his appearance. That is a typical career criminal thing to do. I wouldn't think a doctor would think of that, but he did. What do you think about that, Robert?
Oh, what a great part of the movie, right? And the only way to get away with it is in such a big city like Chicago. He's walking out of the building, and now you're in the outside of public. And the timing is just perfect. The St. Patrick's Day parade, really. And as soon as you drop your coat, you're going to find another coat or jacket on the way anyway. There's going to be so many things around it you can grab, and there's so many outside things being sold. So from a t-shirt to a jacket to a sweatshirt, you can automatically change your appearance, even with a different hat on, a baseball hat or a knit hat, and you blend right in. I mean, look at the crowd of people there. You're gone. You are gone. I mean, it's just like for us, we would be working down in Manhattan. I mean, just imagine chasing somebody on foot in the street, and then they run into Macy's shopping center it's over. And you can have all the cameras in the world. You're going to see it after the fact.
Well, I did like the fact that he put the green bolo on, right? That kind of so he fits in with the whole crowd. He takes his outer jacket off, so he changes his appearance. But you hit up something, and I did the movie The French Connection, and they show our main guy, Popeye Doyle, is following. So I'm trying to follow somebody alone in Manhattan, which is impossible to do, right? And I did the movie The 7-Ups too, which is kind of the sequel, the real sequel to The French Connection. And both of those show trying to surveil people in Manhattan. Very difficult to do, very hard to do. And if they know what they're doing, if they're a smart criminal, it's almost impossible to do. So, Craig, you want to talk a little bit about surveillance in a dense environment like downtown Chicago, at a parade, or in Manhattan?
It's a nightmare. That's one thing that we dread more than anything. We had a case with the state police up in New York. A guy committed a homicide, and he disappeared into the woods. And we got a call from a captain I knew up there, and he's like, "Hey, we need your help." Blah, blah, blah. We ended up getting the guy in New Jersey at a parking lot in a shopping center. But how this guy got away was he had a wig, he put on some lipstick, he put on something under his shirt to make him stack nice, and he put on a dress. And he was the ugliest female you ever seen, but it actually, and he went right through the line. He actually got out of that hot zone because nobody was looking for a female. And nobody paid any attention to how ugly he was or whatever. But these people, some of them, just would use a simple thing like a hat, to throw you off. And when you're in a densely populated area, and you have a photo of this guy in front of you, and you're looking at this photo, and you're saying, okay, but you can't see, he's got a widow's peak, let's say, or something like that. There's certain key features of a person that you're looking for, that you look for, like earlobes are one thing. The art, actually, even the pupils. Some people, their pupils never come all the way down in their eye. There's like a white space underneath. The nose structure, any kind of marks on the face. So these are things that you're trained to look for as an investigator, facial features. But if you just cover that up a little bit with a hat, and you might just have second doubts about looking at that person, because the mind says, okay, look for this guy here, he's got black hair like that, and you got some little piece of paraphernalia on you that throws your mind off what you really want to. You're looking at the picture. You understand what I'm talking about, right? It's just something that you subconsciously do. So it can throw you off, and especially like I was saying with the Procopio thing, we had eyes on this guy, and before we could even get anywhere near the scene, he disappeared into a sea of yellow taxis. And you're not going to go down Fifth Avenue in New York at rush hour when you got 9,000 yellow cabs and you don't know what. So you have to call it off and hope for another day. And hopefully you didn't get made. That's the thing. There's always another day. Okay.
So, terrain makes it difficult, and if you're dealing with somebody who's smart, knows what they're doing, how to change their appearance, which is really what I'm talking about. It
Right.
makes it even more challenging. Hey, Martine, go ahead and roll right into the next scene when you're done with this scene, and that is figuring it out. And so Dr. Kimball is he's going through his list, right? And of all the folks that, and I think he had 5 on his list. He found out, 1 or 2 were dead, and then he visited the guy in the jail, and then he ends up at the retired cop's house, the guy who lost his arm in the line of duty, and he figures out, this is my guy. He's going through his records. He sees pictures of people that he recognizes in the pharmaceutical industry, doctors and stuff like that, and he's starting to put it together, or he put it together at this point, that this has something to do with research, and it has something to do with his identifying that there's a problem with the drug that they want to take to market, and so he knows who the bad guy is at this point, or the one-armed man is, and he knows who the people are that killed his wife, and probably why they killed his wife, and he's going to get his revenge. Now, this is a pretty unrealistic situation, but I think the other thing about this whole thing is he gets away from Gerard again. Now Gerard prides himself on getting his guy, and this is 2 times specifically that Gerard was basically face to face with him, and he loses him. I mean, this has got to hit his pride and his whole team's pride, right? I mean, you're on the heels of somebody, and they just get away. That hurts a team, right? Sometimes you're embarrassed because you think you got him, and he gets away, right, Robert? That happens.
It happens a lot. It happens almost every day. You're going after a lot of people, and it's how the cards are dealt that specific day. You can't catch them all on when you have your plan set up to go out that morning. It's just like it happens. You could be 10 feet from the person you're going after, and there's 100 people in between you, and you're not putting hands on them. Then you got to hit it again.
So Craig, and the ones that got away are why the ones you capture are so sweet, right? When particularly if they take a long time to catch them, and they're smart, like your terrorists from Europe, right? It is that I would think, as the U.S. Marshals, the hunt and the hide and seek aspect of looking for the fugitive is really what makes the job for you guys. Am I right or wrong on that?
Absolutely. That's the bread and butter of the U.S. Marshal Service. It's exhilarating. It's rewarding, and at times it can get crazy. Just like Bobby said, you're not going to get hands on everybody. Sometimes, you're out there with just you and your partner, and you're doing a routine. Yeah, let's go by this guy's address and knock on the door and see what happens, and that happened with me with a case up in the Bronx. We just happened to have my team with me, and luckily so. And they were working a case. I go, you know what? There's an address. Some woman put up bonds for this drug dealer. Let's go by there and knock on the door and see if she'll give up any information. Well, it turned out to be she was lying. One of the investigators on the team found the bad guy's ID in her bedroom. So, we were grilling her, and next thing you know, there's a knock at the door. We opened the door, and some guy tosses in a bowling ball bag full of, well, we didn't know what it was. We grabbed him, cuffed him up, put him on the couch, opened up the bowling ball bag, and there's, $100 bills. Then there's another knock at the door. Some guy comes in with a duffel bag, tosses the duffel bag in there. We open up the duffel bag, and there's another bag full of $100 bills. Then there's another guy comes in, and it's the bad guy. So now we call the DEA up, and the DEA comes down, because it was a DEA case out of, I think it was the Southern District of Ohio, if I remember correctly. And DEA comes, and they confiscate the money. We take the bad guy, and they had no interest on taking the drug, the guy who tossed the money in. So we're like, okay, we got our fugitive, they got their drug money, and the two or three other guys that was, broken English, they're putting their hands out like this, right? And say, and in Spanish, they said, cuff us, take us to jail. We're like, nah, we're not interested in you guys. And they're like, no, you got to take us to jail because we'll get killed, And, so, and the reason why I brought that up is sometimes it's a crapshoot, okay? And I always say this, we're not magicians. We do not have a magic wand, sometimes it's hit or miss. Sometimes it's a lot of, gumshoe old style police work, where you got to actually hit the streets, interview people, talk to informants. So, it's a difficult task, to say the least.
Well, I will say when you catch the guy, it is fun and it's exhilarating. The stuff I dealt with was more, immediate, so you get a call of somebody and you're responding. I did detective work, but not as long as you guys did. But so, and back to our movie here. So
can I just tell you one thing? And
yeah,
Bobby could correct because I might not have. There's a quote by Ernest Hemingway. I'm sure. Do you know that quote? What is it, Bobby? There's no hunting like the hunting of man. And once you hunted man long enough, you don't want to go back to anything else. I'm paraphrasing that a little bit, but that's how it is.
But you guys are hunting the capture for the most part, right? And which is a little different. And because you want the guy to face justice, you want him to be behind bars, or her, to be behind bars. But so our guy, Dr. Kimball, has called up Gerard now, and it's interesting that he calls him up and he basically tells him, "I got my man, I got the one-armed guy," and then he leaves the phone off the hook so that they could trace the phone and knows where to go. And they do a warrant and they hit the house, and now Gerard is pretty much convinced after he hits that house, and this is that Kimball's probably innocent. And that, and because he's found the one-eyed man, that the story's true. There is a one-armed man, and he is connected to the drug industry like Kimball is. There's a linkage there, and even the guy who just chases him can see that and says, "Okay, there's a problem here, but I still got to get my man." And we'll start capturing the evidence to make sure it's preserved, so to make sure the right thing's being done. But that's how Gerard gets there, and of course. Our one-armed man is now, he realizes that the jig is up and that Dr. Kimball's onto him, and he starts surveilling the hospital because they recognize that Dr. Kimball's got to somehow get the evidence to show that the drug that they're proposing is bad. That's going to be done at the hospital, and he surveils the hospital. He ends up finding Dr. Kimball and pursuing him, and they have a confrontation on the train. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but I used to be the chief of police of the LA Metro. So, and so having a shooting on the train, I had those. We had stabbings on trains. This would have been a big deal for me to have a shooting on a train and to have one of our guys shot because they end up having a cop shot in the show here. And I've been on the Chicago, I don't know if they call it the L, but I've been on their transit system too. I was there for couple of conferences, so they give you a free pass when you're doing a transit chief. So you're not that I wanted to use the train a lot when I was there, but so I've been on that, and so this would be a really dramatic thing. So go ahead, confrontation on the train, Martine. Let's show that one. And I think the importance about this scene is Kimball has this confrontation. He ends up winning this fight with the one-armed man, but the cop gets killed, and it does set the stage for now everybody's after Kimball, and the Chicago police are really interested in getting him because they believe that he's the guy that shot the cop. And it's interesting here. They show the guy's looking at the paper and he's reading the paper, and then he looks up at Kimball. I like these kinds of scenes in movies. So what'd you think of the scene, Robert? Did you ever have to take somebody down in a transit system?
No, I've had a perp escape from me through the trains. But I don't think, look at it, it's the Chicago train line, and there's 2 or 3 people on a train at any given time. That's insane. No way. Yeah. But no, it's a typical movie scene. If you're in New York, the trains are
full,
mobbed all day long. You can't figure it out, when they're breaking down, and it's just complete chaos. And, of course, it's going to go bad. Somebody on a fight like that on the train is getting hurt to the point of possibly dead.
Well, have you ever taken somebody down on a train, Craig?
Not on the train, but we were on 8th Avenue and 42nd Street in Manhattan looking for a bad guy, and he made it down into the subway. That was a nightmare. We had to shut down part of the subway system, and that didn't go over too well.
No, it never does.
So when typical NYPD transit boss said, listen, because we can't shut this, coming up on rush hour, this is the blood veins of the New York City transit. We're going to let the trains roll, and hopefully it'll solve your problem. They'll scoop them up under the wheels of the train, But what he did was, these guys are so, I use this in a double way. A lot of times, especially when they bust out of jail, I say, we give them more credit than what they deserve. Okay. But a lot of times they're just found aimlessly wandering in the woods, trying to make it to the next location, stealing food from people, like the last case up in Pennsylvania with Cavalcanti. So, a lot of times we give these guys too much credit because we're indoctrinated into seeing all these movies with these elaborate escape plans. In real life, most of them don't have any elaborate escape plan.
No.
It's an escape of opportunity, and then they're out there in the woods, trying to survive. But getting back to what you made a point earlier with the mountain search and rescue and all that, it goes both ways. Where the law enforcement, have the expertise and the knowledge of the land, the layout, and all that. But when you got these, I call them the New York City urban dwellers, slab dwellers, they know the subway system. They know if they go down one set of subway stairs and get a jump on you, go through this weird maze of corridors, they'll come up on the next block. Okay. I didn't grow up in Manhattan, so I don't know the subway system. I know a few of the trains that run, but I don't know the intricate passageways. And Bobby's a Queens guy. He could probably attest to that better than I. But, it's a maze down there.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know where you're going, you could end up going up to a train, getting on the wrong train, going up to Harlem, or going down to Coney Island, So these guys know their layout. And this guy he never actually went onto the tracks. What we found out later when we caught him, he goes, I went down that step, I went through the corridor, jumped over the turnstile, and came up across the street. I was watching all you idiots,
Well, I can tell you, the phone call would have been made right to the chief. Why are you stopping the trains?
Oh my God. Yep.
Martine, go ahead and roll right into the next scene as soon as this one is done, and we'll wrap up our show here. But so Chicago PD is now chasing him, and obviously Gerard now thinks this guy is innocent, but he's still a fugitive, and he's still got to do his job. He's still got to take him custody. Go ahead and roll into the scene. Doctors fighting, and Kimball innocent. I think that's what I named that. The interesting thing about this is I don't think I've ever seen a scene before where you had two doctors fighting it out, and this is a knockdown, drag out fight. I always think of doctors as soft, right? They're not going to be in this kind of knockdown, drag out fight. But he confronts the guy at a banquet where he's supposed to be installed on the board of this drug company, and where he had placed some samples that were incorrect that indicated that this drug worked when it really didn't work. The doctor, our main bad guy here, who used the police officer as part of the security for the drug corporation. That's our bad guy right there. He also killed another doctor, a pathologist, to do this, which I can understand corruption. I can't see doctors killing each other just to get on a drug board. I guess it must be a lot of money involved. But it was interesting that we had these two doctors fighting as the climax to the scene. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. And then Gerard, of course, gets there, and one doctor ends up getting the drop. He knocks one of the agents out, which I kind of didn't agree with. I thought that was kind of cheesy. And he he gets the drop on Gerard again. This is the third time I think Gerard's had the drop on him. And it was actually Dr. Kimball who ends up saving him in the end. I don't know. Have you guys ever had somebody, a bad guy, have the drop on you guys that you knew about? Because you never know if they have the drop on you and they don't act on it. And on the wrong end of a gun here, Robert?
No, I mean, I've been involved in shootings, in my career. Somewhat prepared for them, going in there, but in any predicaments like this, no, never,
No, nothing like
never
that.
in my career. No, thank goodness. No.
Thank goodness. How about you, Craig? Where they clearly had a drop on you and you were lucky to get out of there? I mean,
Well, not so much to say like a drop with a gun and a bad guy, but back in, I guess around 89, 90, during the big crack epidemic, we were hitting these crack houses in New York City. And what they would do, and mainly the Jamaican shower posse. There was a guy called Delroy Uzi Edwards. He introduced crack and cocaine to the East Coast. What they would do is we would hit these locations, and we'd hit the roof. We'd have people up on the roof. We'd have people hitting the door. The location was barricaded. But what they would do is they'd hollow out the top part of the roof and put a piece of tar paper over the roof. And then down below, they'd have these boards with nails driven through the boards. Okay. Almost like, you remember the Addams Family, Uncle Fester's bed? Had the spikes on it. It was like that. So one time we were hitting this location. It was a hardened location. We had NYPD emergency service unit. They had ladders, hit the place with the ladders. We went up on the roof, and one of our deputies actually stepped onto this tar paper and was falling through the roof as somebody grabbed him. And we pulled him, to safety and all. But what they would do is they'd have booby traps set up in these houses, particularly to kill or maim or hurt or deter law enforcement. So that was like and when we grabbed him, I wasn't one to grab him. I was on the other side of the roof. And I just looked down the hole, and all I seen was these nails, like 3-inch nails sticking through the board. And I was like, holy crap, this guy fell, he would have been impaled, probably killed, So that's the closest I ever came to, any kind of weirdness like that.
well, I first of all, we're finishing up our show here. Dr. Kimball, as I said, he's on the roof and he's fighting it out with the doctor. The reason why I say that comment is I just see doctors as soft. I don't see them as the men of action kind of guys. But I guess when your life is on the line, that's what happened. But the movie itself was really well received. It was one of the top grossing movies in 1993, and it's still entertaining for me today. I still enjoyed the movie, and I think I actually like this movie better than the U.S. Marshal movie. But it was. What'd you think of the movie making yourself, Robert? You liked the movie? Did you enjoy the movie?
Oh, it was entertaining, but I liked U.S. Marshal better, being that it was in New York, so it gives you more of a real life feeling there. But no, it was entertaining. You can still watch it, and there is some good takes from it, and you have good conversations like this. So it's definitely worth it.
How about you, Craig? Did you like the movie? How did you compare it to the U.S. Marshals itself? What'd you think? Which one was better? And did you like this movie itself?
Unlike Bobby, I like the first one better, actually. You know what? Like we said earlier, it was entertaining, and it was kind of like not only entertaining, but it was like I guess a proud moment for the Marshal Service that finally we got a big Hollywood production making a movie about the U.S. Marshals instead of the FBI or DEA or something like that. Because throughout many years, for some reason, I don't know whether it was leadership or just nobody gave a crap. We flew under the radar. Okay, even when I first came on, they said, yeah, the marshals are coming to pick up the prisoner. I go, what do you mean the marshals? They go, yeah, the U.S. Marshals. I go, what are they going to bring, a horse and buggy down the alley of behind the MCC? I go, they still exist. So back in that time, nobody really realized the U.S. Marshals were still around. And until we started, the younger guys started going, hey, let's make a name for ourselves. We're the oldest, whatever. We were the best at one time. Let's get that light back. Let's start making press interviews of all the great arrests we make, and finally caught on. And we're back to the old glory days, so to speak, of the U.S. Marshal and chasing the fugitive. So I think the movie was a big boost, a good shot in the arm. I think it was well done as a movie. Not totally realistic of what we really do. Bits and pieces of it are okay, but like I said, it was a good plot. It was a movie, and it's entertainment. So that's what it's all about.
Well, you guys had your heyday in pop culture with the Western, right? We always had the U.S. Marshals in the Western, and I'm glad nobody wore a cowboy hat here, right? So it was the modern incarnation of the U.S. Marshals. I do think it presented you guys. Now, having been in law enforcement, I of course interact with the U.S. Marshals in the past, but you're right; they kind of flew under the radar for at least a couple of decades.
Correct.
After the demise of the Westerns, and the FBI became, with all their, because we kind of suffer that a little bit here in LA. LAPD always seems to get a lot of the Hollywood kind of stuff, but hey, the sheriff's department is just as capable. But we just don't capture the imagination of everybody after Adam 12, right? That kind of set the tone for the LAPD being the primary Hollywood local law enforcement agency, and that follow very closely with NYPD. Hey guys, thank you for coming on my show here. I think we're going to wrap up here. I already explained how this happens, but we're at our 2-hour mark, and I hope you guys will stick around for a quick debrief. And because I do want to bring you guys back for Con Air down the road, get you in the queue, and we could talk about that. Another fantasy movie, but it does involve the U.S. Marshal, and it's got some funny stuff in it. So, hey, Martine, let's go ahead and take it away. We'll finish up, and you guys stick around for debrief.